Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of Tabitha's Art Tips. Today we are going to be talking about the round brush, and these are all examples of round brushes. And why are they called round? Well, let me tell you. This has to do with this metal bit here, which is called the ferrule. I believe that's how you pronounce it. And if you look at it from the top, it is round, just like the flat brush had the pinched or flat ferrule. Now, of course, there are other brushes not called round or flat that do have a round or flat ferrule, but we won't talk about that right now. So the round brush, look how wonky that one is. Crazy. Like I said last week, I use cheap brushes, so wonky brush still works. The round brush is something I have to say I have only been using for a couple of years. Well, 5 or 6 years. And it actually took some artist friends, 2 different friends on 2 different occasions, to convince me to use this thing, but I love it. So what can you do with a round brush? Well, it kind of depends on what size you're using. So my favorite are these little more detailed brushes. Or my favorite is a medium round brush. It depends on what I'm doing. So this big one, I don't use it all that much unless I'm using it with watercolor. It's really great for watercolors because it holds a lot of water. But let's see what we can do here with acrylics. So I'm actually soaking this up with water. I don't like to water my acrylics too much if I'm using canvas or canvas paper. This is canvas paper. Actually, it's canvas. It's sheets of canvas. It's a canvas pad, not paper. But if you water it down too much, it's going to not adhere to the canvas. So don't get too much water in your acrylics unless you're using them on paper. So what's nice about the round brush is the variety of sizes of brush strokes you can get. So I can press down and see how the tip spreads out, and then I can get lighter and lighter, less pressure, and get a really skinny line. And because this particular brush holds so much water and paint, that line goes on for a long ways. I don't need to reload for a long time. So what else I like to do with a round brush is to use the edge. So you can get paint on the whole side of it there. And if you're really clever, you can load up this brush. This is not a trick I normally use. I'm sure there's other videos out there for this. Put 2 colors on there. And get a nice blend, just like that. So don't be afraid to experiment with your brushes. Try some different things out. Let's see. Got two colors on here, and I'm just going to lay it down and almost use it as a stamp. I have a long-handled paintbrush and not a lot of space. So, in that case, you just turn the canvas around when you don't have enough space. So that's kind of fun. It's not the way I tend to paint, but it's kind of fun and something you can do with a round brush. Another thing you can do is sort of the same idea. Kind of fun, right? So this brush that I was using is it's not incredibly stiff, but it's a little stiff, and partially because it's so big. It's just this big, wide. This is a number 12, so there's a lot of bristles there. So there's not a heck of a lot of give. This brush I love. This is one of my favorite brushes. This is a Royal and Langnickel Zen round brush, size 6. And it's very, see how soft that is? Very soft. So round brushes are great when you want to be able to get a thin line. Now it takes a bit of practice. It's very easy to get a wide line accidentally, especially if you're heavy-handed. Your line will be wide pretty quick. But oh, and here's another tip. Roll your round brushes through your paint. Roll, roll, roll to keep that point on there. So practice with it. Practice pressing down and then lightening up on that pressure. See how thin of a line you can get. And then maybe go thicker again. You can have a lot of fun doodling in the paint. Okay, so for paintings, where does this leave me? What do I use this for when I'm actually painting and not doodling? Oh, let me pull out this brush demo painting I started last week. And this is where I really do start to use these round brushes. So first of all, it is really great for tree branches because of that pressure. So I'm just using what I got because this is for fun. But for tree branches, you want it thicker towards the base of the tree, towards the trunk, and the branches get thinner as you go out. So if you just press down and then lighten up on your pressure, you get a thin a thin branch, and a pink one at that in this case. This is art, not reality. Why not have pink branches? Now this particular brush is a little big for doing small branches. This would be better like if I wanted to start a new tree. Let's do that. So you press down closer to the branch and then you lighten up on the pressure as you go to the end of the branch. Now for the smaller branches, I go for a smaller brush, the right brush for the right job, right? So this is a number 3 Princeton Art and Brush Company. And I'll just get that a little bit wet. Roll my brush through some paint. And here is where, and I'm actually going to switcheroonie there. Here is where I like to actually use my pinky for balance. This is where acrylic paints have an advantage over oils because this dries very quick, so I can put my hands on it. But I just use my pinky to balance. And then I just pull this brush through the paint. Or I should say, I pull the brush across the canvas. So I'm really not even putting any weight down. I'm letting the brush do the work. And you can accidentally get a bigger stroke. And of course, if you're doing a tree branch, if you're doing trees here, just make another branch right out of that. So you can see where I have more control over these branches than I did last week with the flat brush. Flat brush worked great for the bigger branches, but once you start getting to the smaller branches, I like to switch to a round brush. Now, just like I did the texture on the tree with the flat brush last time, I can do texture on a tree with a round brush also. So I like to get 2 different colors on my brush. And I'm just doing these short brush strokes up and down the tree. And again, this is a really light touch. I mean, sometimes it's less about the paintbrush you use or the shape of the paintbrush and more about how you use it. More about the pressure you apply and how much paint and water or medium or paint thinner or whatever you're using. So keep that in mind when you're having trouble with brushes. If things aren't working the way you think they should be working, sometimes it is the paintbrush that is at fault. Well, the paintbrush is not at fault, but you know what I mean. It's the paintbrush. You're not using the right brush for the right job. And then other times the paintbrush is fine and it's just that you need more practice with it and you need to know to learn how much pressure and paint and water to put on it. There's a lot. It's actually a lot to know about painting, about paintbrushes. One issue I do see people having is sometimes I watch people paint and they try and paint big areas with tiny brushes. Don't do that. Get out a big brush. Just get out a big brush if you're going to paint a big area. Okay, so I want to move on to grasses. Round brushes are great for grasses. The flat brushes, you sort of have to figure it out and you might muddle through and you don't get as much detail. But the round brush was built for this. So I've got my medium round brush. I'm rolling it through my paint so that I keep that nice sharp tip. Actually, I'm going to get some white in there so we can differentiate between last week's grasses and you can see a little better what's happening. So it's the same brush stroke as I did with the flat brush. It's basically putting the brush at the bottom of the canvas or wherever you want the grasses and pulling up and lightening up on pressure. So let me do this a little bit slower. But it does help, I find, for me anyway, to do it quicker. And I go from the bottom up because it's easier for me to start with the with more pressure at the bottom. Whereas if I went from the top down, I don't know, that just doesn't make sense to me. But try it out. You might do grasses from the top down. It does not work for me. Got to keep enough water on that brush to keep the paint flowing. And that grass starts to look better when I get more layers on it. And then of course I can go in with a smaller brush and get more detailed, thinner blades. This would actually work better if my paint were dry. before I went over it with another layer because it's sort of blending in there. But you get the point. And then the final way that I can think of anyway, that I use the round brush is when I just want to get some fine detail. I feel like I have a lot of control over this brush. And I can use it almost like a pen. Which makes it actually obviously good for signatures. So that's it. Experiment with your round brushes. See what you like, see what works. Experiment with the amount of water you get on these brushes. Experiment with the amount of paint you get on these brushes. Experiment with the pressure you put on the brush. Lighten it up, press harder, keep it moving, and when you run out of paint, reload it. The round brush is a beautiful thing. Just remember, let the brush do the work. Let the brush do the work. Let the brush do the work. And that's it. That's all I got for you on the round brush. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video and are watching on YouTube, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more art tips and tutorials.